I think that we can all agree that voting is the state's most essential business. I think Democrats and Republicans agree with that. So I appreciate the ability to have this conversation today to address concerns with our most essential business. Now, according to your December 2020 Pennsylvania post-election audit work group year 2 report, it asserts that Pennsylvania is one of the first states to pioneer risk limiting audit pilots. Did you look at other states as models for Pennsylvania's risk limiting audit or any type of audit that you wanted to do?
So thank you, Senator. So again, the work of the work group began in 2019. And again, one of the reasons why the experts are part of that work group, because they do bring their wealth of experience of how risk limiting audits have been conducted in other states. If we want to get into the real geeky stuff, there are, I guess 3 different methods by which you can conduct.
Right, and I understand that. I guess the question really is, did you look at other states with regard to this?
Yes. Yes, and I was going to really quickly say that one of the things that when you're looking at other states, and this is why you have to kind of get into the geekiness of it. You have to look at what is the voting, the voting method, and how ballots are tabulated, and the type of voting equipment that's used to see if a particular type of a audit will work for our state. There is one particular type, and Ms. Morrell or Mr. Lindeman can speak to that is used, for instance, in the state of, I believe, Colorado, right? That would not work for Pennsylvania. So to answer your immediate question, yes, we did. I know that we did look at other states, and we had to find, the best method that would work for our voting system and our processes, but we were able to conduct audits of the 2 other types of audits. I don't know if Ms. Morrell, I know you haven't, we may want to give Ms. Morrell, I've asked her to, help us out. So Jennifer, if you don't mind, Senator, if Ms. Morrell wants to speak to experiences in other states.
Yeah, I would be happy to. This has been a great conversation today. Obviously, what we're talking about is how we provide evidence that the election was secure, and Secretary Degraffenreid is correct. Thinking about the methodology of RLA, the methods that we're going to use really is determined on the voting method, on the technology, and in some cases, honestly, the voting culture of different states can influence the way you want to conduct that audit. Ultimately, having a working group is so valuable, and I really commend the state for doing that, because it gives people with experience in running elections, in handling ballots, the opportunity not just to learn about how RLAs work, but as you heard from some of the other testimony, when we think about the ultimate audit, we do need to consider how are ballots handled, how are they stored, how are they organized, how are they tracked, how do we account for aggregate quantities, how do we reconcile that against information from the voting system? So all of those things factor in. And as you've heard, we have Colorado, one of the first states, state that I worked in as a local election official, to do risk limiting audits, because ballots are all scanned and counted centrally, meaning they're all brought back from polling locations as well as the mail ballots to one facility. That enabled us to do a particular type of RLAs called a ballot comparison audit, where we can look at the ballot and compare it to the record from the voting system. In other states where predominance of ballots are cast in person at the polling location, that method doesn't work. So as you've seen here in Pennsylvania, the batch comparison method, they did the ballot polling method initially, where they were looking for similar similar results in the sample as the reported outcome. This last round and this year, they've been focused on the batch comparison method, which is used in Rhode Island. I will tell you other states that are have either made RLAs optional or are going through this pilot process are looking at all three, and some are actually considering hybrids of some of those. In other words, are applying one method to, for example, their mail ballots, and one method to the ballots that are cast in person. But ultimately, it really is having that expertise from your local election officials, sort of thinking about the best method to work with their policies and procedures here in Pennsylvania.
So regardless of which of those types of risk limiting audits that you do, the concern that I have heard is that risk limiting audits don't offer fidelity, that an ecosystem approach or a performance audit of the system would offer more fidelity in terms of looking at the processes with regard to elections. So were any of those types of audits looked at before making a decision to pilot a risk limiting audit, looking at a performance audit, looking at our processes, and I'm going to be paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact quote, but there was a Spotlight PA article that said with a risk limiting audit, we know who won, but we know nothing else. And that a performance audit would give us, those are the types of accountability measures that we need to look at so that we can help counties do a better job with the process. You think back to the old Ford versus Toyota debate, right? So back in the day, if there were cars or trucks coming off the line and it wasn't working right, Ford would fix each of those individual vehicles, whereas Toyota shut the whole assembly line down and fixed the process that was creating that end result. So I have a concern and would like to know from the acting secretary, are we looking at doing a performance audit? Because, it doesn't matter. I've talked to Democrats and Republicans in my district. As a matter of fact, Democrat who I vote at the same polling place with this gentleman, have known him for years, said to me, in order for you to have fidelity in the selection process, you have to audit the voting process itself, not just the outcome of the election, which is what a risk limiting audit does. So are we looking at potentially doing performance audits? I know Oregon just completed one. They just put together a comprehensive report. I think our people need to know that our system has integrity, that it has fidelity, that it works, and they trust not only in the outcomes, but in the process itself. So where do we stand on looking at more of an ecological approach to auditing here in the Commonwealth?
Okay, thank you. So, okay. When counties are doing their work, and I think I've tried to explain, all the way back through voter registration, all the way through certification, there are things that counties will do, even at a voting place, right, on election night. Prior to them packing up their equipment, they do ballot control logs. There's so many things, Senator, that our counties do, that all counties do all over this country to ensure that there's integrity in various processes of the elections ecosystem, right? There's one election expert who I value a lot, Merrill King, who called the system of systems, and all of the things that you have to do when you're looking at the various subcomponents of elections administration. And so there's audit opportunities throughout that whole ecosystem. I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean by a performance audit. And so Jennifer Morrell, who's an expert in audits, certainly could probably give more light onto that. And it could be that that is something that's a term of art that you're using that maybe some have used, but really illustrates something that is already being accomplished. Now, also, I'll ask Jennifer to add more insight into that, but I would also use this as an opportunity to talk about something that's important to me. Pre-canvassing is one of the things, but the other thing that I believe that will be important going forward with respect to elections administration, Jonathan mentioned the archaic numbered list of voters. He kids me all the time because I hate Pennsylvania's numbered list of voters. It is archaic, and I would encourage us to look towards electronic poll books. And the reason for that is that when you're using electronic poll books, then the counties are able to import their voter history in a more timely manner. And I believe that that is the one of the big keys of election integrity. One person, one vote, the number of people who participated should equal the number of ballots cast. And we can do that. We can do that more easily when it comes to actually mail-in and absentee voting, because their presentation is of the application that's being recorded into the SURE system. So how many of those applications were approved, how many ballots were issued, how many ballots came back, how many ballots were approved, ultimately how many ballots were canvassed, how many ballots were tabulated. So, Senator, throughout that process, right, I've just explained from voter registration to the application process, ballot issuance process, the process of receipt of the ballot, and the canvassing process, there is accountability all throughout that ecosystem. I would ask that we could opportunity for the counties to be able to do the same thing for in-person voting as well. Not that they don't do it now, but it would be more efficient and certainly more timely if counties had, electronic poll books. And, I literally could spend all day talking about this, but hopefully that answered your question.
Something that you have been very passionate about. And I think that, when I speak to constituents, they're also concerned, not just with auditing the results of the election, but auditing the process of the election. And just one last question for you. Are you able to share my county's 2% audit with me as well as my county's risk limiting audit? Are those things that I, as a legislator, or my constituents can actually look at those audits? Can you share those with me?
Thank you, Senator. That brings another, so Mr. Lindeman, we can share the Arlo system, is that correct? The risk limiting audit, so that information can be provided. The Department of State is, I cannot share the 2% audit from your county because the Department of State does not have it. So I would ask that something else that we can absolutely change. In my former state of North Carolina, the audits came to the department, the State Board of Elections, and so that was information, and so they shared that with us. Here in the Commonwealth, that's one of the things, I am a believer of election uniformity, so there's an opportunity for, something that we could do is to allow, not that the counties would not share that with us, but there's not a mechanism or a means to do that. So I believe that that's a wonderful question, and I would ask that no matter what we do when it comes to, certainly we're looking at risk limiting audits, if that's something that we would want to do, or a hybrid, but I do believe there's value in the Department of State collecting that information and making it available to the public as well. Thank you, Senator.
I agree with you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.